Yo, thank you, FANdation. We are back with another recap of our favorite, F is for family, show, FANdation. I'm your host, Anthony, and I'm going to do my best to be your guide in this far-out show, as we're actually picking up where episode 6 ended, where we saw Harry White captured by Tellum Bond, and we learned how he met his life partner, Yara, and the origin of all his hate toward the Empire. This episode is titled Unnecessary Death, which is a very interesting title, as this could be referring to Queen Sareth and how she's now in a position to be queen of the entire empire, but only after the passing of all of the other heirs to take on the queenship of Dominion. Sareth and Day have an interesting moment in this episode where she talks about her family, and Day pretty much remarks that those deaths were necessary to bring Sareth to the position that she's in now. I find these poetic titles to be really interesting, and I can't wait to dive into all of the fun that happens in this episode. But first, do me a favor, if you're new here, please consider giving this channel a like and subscribe to keep up with our weekly FANdation analysis and breakdowns. Look, I see that these videos, they're finally getting some traction. We're getting close to like 1,000 views. I'm really grateful to all of you for allowing me to have your time. I get it. I know how valuable time is. I'm truly grateful. I really thank you. Please hit that like button. Let YouTube and me know that you like these videos and you want to see more of them in the future. Please like, subscribe, enable notifications so you're able to watch these videos right after they're published every Friday in order to work with us to figure out the mystery of FANdation. I truly appreciate it, and I'm very grateful. Thank you so much for your time. This episode starts off with a very interesting moment with us seeing Brother Constant and Polly both imprisoned after being arrested during the last episode. Now, the prison is a very interesting looking room with some pulsating lights that seem to be having a really interesting effect on Brother Constant. Now, if you pay close attention, she looks mesmerized as she's staring at the lights for a moment. But then all of a sudden, she has a change of posture and holds her arms behind her back. Polly jokes about how there are so many guards in the room, just in case someone commits suicide by means of boredom. And Brother Constant says, if that were possible, would any of us still draw breath? And even Polly gives her a cold side-eye for not sounding like herself. A moment later, the camera angle switches and we see Constant shake it off, and she starts behaving like herself. I love how this actress introduced the two different body languages here. I also feel like this is great writing at work, with Brother Constant foreshadowing and giving clues to this big moment later in the episode. Moving on, Polly is having a pity party about being captured, as Brother Day and Demerzel are watching them on camera from another location. Now, Brother Day talks about how interesting it is that they're arriving here on Trantor at the same time that General Rios is arriving on Terminus. They talk a bit more, and then the conversation shifts, and we see Demerzel question Day about whether if now is still a good time for him to move forward with his marriage with Queen Sareth of Cloud Dominion. And she's just outright overt at this point with her attempts to sway Day's decision with sexual innuendo. She's all rubbing his back and near speaking, but Day kind of shakes it off and tells Demerzel that things are going to be different from now on, but assures her that she'll always have a place with this new family, and even confirms that his children will also be Empire, just the same. We then switch to see Queen Sareth and Rue having a drink and taking a look at the video of Sareth's speech from last episode. You remember that speech, right? The one where she cast crazy shade on Brother Day in front of the whole galaxy? Yeah, I know you remember that. Sareth is all proud of how she was able to make Day squirm in front of a large audience, but Rue is a bit concerned. She offers Sareth some advice to never embarrass Day, and she's not at all wrong. The Cleons seem very prideful to me, so I'm with Rue on this one. Before the conversation goes any further, they're interrupted by Demerzel, who walks in to let Sareth know that she's being summoned by the doctors to perform an examination to ensure that she's capable of producing an heir. We then switch to the hallway, with Sareth and Rue being escorted by Demerzel to the examination room. And Now, listen. I love me some good old-fashioned lunchroom disses. The sophisticated ignorance required to be a skilled verbal fighter is just a sheer joy for me to watch. And we're treated to a hell of a fight night right here. Everybody, get your popcorn ready because it's now time for round 1 of Demerzel versus Sareth. And it does not disappoint. The scene starts off looking innocent until Sareth opens her mouth and says that she knows that Demerzel is a robot. And the look. It's so fast, but so powerful. The look that Demerzel cuts to Sareth as she hears her say, I know what you are. I know your mechanical nature. Like she gave her that, like, I should off you right now. And this is just the start. Sareth uses this information to tell Demerzel that she wants to be included in all of the family secrets and stresses that she doesn't want to be left out. Demerzel surprisingly confirms to Sareth that she is a machine, and it's really surprising considering that there are other people in the room when she does this. Rue and Sareth's guard, handman Han, are following right behind, and it's at this moment I feel like Demerzel just made a decision. Sareth asks if there are any other machines, and Demerzel tells her that she's the last machine that she knows about, and she's been serving Empire since Cleon the First. Sareth then asks if Demerzel served any masters before Cleon, and Demerzel gives an answer that's kind of caught me by surprise when she says, not directly. And Sareth and I both want to know, what does that mean? Demerzel chooses to give a non-answer and instead talks about how she was originally programmed to serve and not harm humans, but now her only directive is to serve Empire. Sareth asks Demerzel straight up, are you going to get in line when I'm Empress? And Demerzel gives her a little F you when she answers and says that she will serve Empire. And I ain't gonna front. Round 1 goes to Sareth, hands down. But things are definitely just getting started between these two. We then switch to see Sareth on one of those gynecological exam table thingies. Look, I'm not gonna pretend to be an expert on this stuff, so bear with me. There's a room full of like 10, 20, 30 doctors or something here, and maybe even just some general audience members as they're all gathered for Sareth's reproductive examination. Demerzel's there too, standing front row and center, and you can even catch a little smirk on her face throughout the examination. The creators choose some interesting camera angles in this scene, and we see a 3D manifestation of Sareth's reproductive organs on display as the lead doctor inserts some sort of device that scans her body, and the whole thing just looks uncomfortable. Like, I'm squirming just talking about it, right? Like, the doctor even lets her know that they plan on harvesting eggs from her. And what? Sareth tries to shut this down immediately, letting the doc know that needs to wait until after marriage day. And Demerzel quips and says, you're in no position to argue. And Sareth catches that quick as we see another choice camera angle and Sareth responding and letting her know that she can argue in any position. Sareth and Demerzel go back and forth, with Demerzel even calling Sareth's womb imperial property. And Sareth claps back quick, and you would know all about being imperial property. Yo, Demerzel had to eat that. Rue tries to break it up and starts talking on Sareth's behalf that there's plenty of time to do this later, but Sareth's not done with Demerzel yet. She throws in another haymaker when she tells Demerzel that she knows about her and Day's arrangement and she has no intention of getting in the way. And yo, for real, the look on Demerzel's face as Sareth is just eating her up and spilling secrets in front of an audience. If looks could kill, Demerzel would have Sareth's head on a plate. Demerzel realizes she's going to have to take this L and tells the doctors to fall back. They have many years ahead of them to continue this process. We then hear them briefly discuss the process to reverse Day's sterility before wrapping things up. As Demerzel dismisses everyone, she insists on having a moment alone with the Queen. Everyone leaves the room, and it's at this moment that it feels like Demerzel just stopped giving an absolute about doublespeak and confronts Sareth straight up. She tells her that she knows that Sareth thinks that Brother Day was involved with the death of her family. She even tells her that if she ever thinks about entertaining some fantasy of revenge, then she better think about how her family died with robotic-like precision. In other words, around and find out. And yo, Demerzel did that. And Sareth, it's like her whole persona melts away as Demerzel exits the room, and Sareth just has to break down and start ugly crying alone. And I love this. But, what is up with Demerzel? It feels like she's got an agenda on her own, especially with her attitude towards Sareth and the threat that Sareth represents to the genetic dynasty. Alright, so we then switch back to the planet Ignis, where we see Salvor walking toward Gail, who's mumbling to herself and counting prime numbers again. You might remember that Gail likes to count prime numbers when she's nervous, and I guess also when she's in deep concentration. Salvor catches Gail off guard, who accidentally uses her powers of telekinesis to push Salvor back when Salvor breaks her concentration. Salvor doesn't even care about, being knocked to the floor, and instead wants to use this opportunity to plead to Gail. They believe that Harry left Ignis, and Salvor thinks it's time for them to leave too, but Gail isn't with it. Salvor realizes that Gail wants to stay in order to protect Salvor from the mule in the future. Salvor suspects that Gail is hiding something from the Mentalics at this time as well, and Salvor's just too uncomfortable in this place and doesn't want to stay. But before the conversation can get any further, they get interrupted by young Sheldon, who lets Gail and Salvor know that it's time to eat. We then switch to an open area where we see a few of the Mentalics working around the camp in preparation for a feast that they're throwing for Gail and Salvor. Young Sheldon slips off without saying a word, and Gail and Salvor are then greeted by Tellum Bond, who apologizes about Harry leaving them, and then begins leading Gail one direction with Salvor wandering somewhere else. We then switch to what looks like the Mentalics' fishing port, with Salvor approaching the dude who impersonated her boyfriend, Lauren, and he's there gathering seafood for breakfast. Now, I don't know what those little mollusks things taste like, but for some reason, they had my mouth watering. Gail and Lauren talk a bit about the feast Tellum is throwing for Gail and Salvor, and it feels like there's a little bit of flirting going on between the two. Salvor is ever observant though, and notices something in the background that raises her suspicion. I will admit that I couldn't quite tell what it was that put her on high alert. It could be that the boat further down the beach, there's people on it, they're not bringing in fish. I think that's what it is that caught her attention. If someone else caught something else that set off her red flag, let me know what you think it is, and I'll shout you on the next video. Salvor then hears Lauren say something about how he thinks what's great about this place is that no one can hide. And Gail uses this opportunity to fact-check him with her powers, and she flips her coin to see if he's telling the truth. I think Lauren realizes that he effed up because his demeanor kind of switches up and he walks off right after this happens. We then switch to the camp with these Mentalics playing ocarinas? Those are ocarinas, right? Like the flute thing? Tellum and Gail are off to the side talking, with Salvor and Lauren arriving with today's catch. Lauren drops the little shrimp squids into a pot to start cooking them, and Salvor immediately freaks all the way out. Tellum and Gail notice that Salvor seems to be able to sense the pain that these creatures are going through, and Tellum comments about how their powers allow them to feel all of the senses of others, especially when they're around other Mentalics, and their abilities are even stronger when there's harmony. And she points to the Cabbage Patch Kids playing their ocarinas in a circle. Gail wonders if they're better to just stick to eating plant-based food, but Tellum counters that plants feel pain too. She then goes into a monologue about how suffering is a requirement, and humanity tries to pretend otherwise. She then tells Gail and Salvor a story about former Emperor Candor, who liked to bathe in a violet pigment extracted from the mollusks, and how he died of overabundance. She claims that she and her mentalics are different because they don't shy away from the pain that they cause. And Tellum is revealing more and more about her true self every day. Soundboard tries to play it off and comments about how she's going to be able to hear her food as she's eating from now on. And they confirm that Salvor's powers are now growing. We then switch to Hober Malo. Hober Malo is right where we left him, in that honeycomb room of the spaceship of the Spacers. And they want answers. How the hell did Hober know where they were going to be? They randomized their jumps. How did he know? Hober tries to explain that he was given the location of their arrival by Harry Black. But the Spacers ain't trying to hear it and tells Hober straight up that he's going to have to die. And he's going to take that knowledge with him. And he quickly lets her know that he has something for her and shows her a vial of a substance called Opalesque. Apparently, Opalesque is a micronutrient that is all but impossible to synthesize and is something that the Spacers are dependent on because of their modifications. Empire supplies the Spacers with Opalesque in exchange for 10% of their offspring, which are then put into service of the Empire. As we saw in previous episodes, they navigate their ships when the people are put to sleep during those deep space travel. Harry Seldon's FANdation has found a way to create it and will be happy to supply the Spacers with the vital resource. Hober also shows her that his ship is able to navigate deep space without the need for Spacers, and shows her that Empire will no longer be dependent on the Spacers once this technology is widely available. Hober then offers the Spacers the opportunity to explore a new sense of freedom with the ability to explore the universe without being in service of Empire. And the idea seems to be intriguing. We then switch to Bel Rios and his husband Glaywin reading through that book that they swiped in a previous episode. It looks like Glaywin's book is based on Hinduism. In the book, we see an image of who I think is the Hindu god Krishna. I think. Known for his charismatic and playful nature, Krishna is one of the most beloved and revered figures in Hinduism. He's known as the god of protection, compassion, tenderness, and love. Krishna's life is a mix of diverse stories, from his childhood pranks to his profound teachings on duty and righteousness. And he's often depicted engaging in light, fun activities like playing the flute to animals and devotees, or engaging in joyful dances with his companions. Krishna is also known as the 8th incarnation of Vishnu, the supreme being who creates, protects, and transforms the universe. Now, I can't quite make out all of the text, but I believe one of the phrases here translates to, "They flow greatly." If anyone can tell me more information, please let me know in the comments so that I can shout you out in an upcoming video. Glaywin and Bel are watching Day's announcement that he's ending the genetic dynasty. And another reason this scene is interesting is because if they're watching this live, then that means we're getting a taste of some of that non-linear storytelling, as we saw this moment happen in episode 6 with Bel watching this now in episode 7. If you remember from a few episodes back, one of Bel's crew actually is a Spacer. Now, this Spacers has been analyzing the footage of one of the Foundation's ships, trying to figure out the technology. Interestingly, she seems to zone out in the middle of the conversation, and her skin and eyes grow brighter. Hold that thought in the back of your mind. At that same moment, we switch back to Hober Malo, who is still negotiating with the leader of the Spacers on behalf of the Foundation. She lets Hober know that the risk is too great for them and declines his offer to side with the Foundation. Now, the Spacer on Bel's ship is receiving a message from the leader of the Spacers and lets her know that they have the spaceship that Bel is looking for and that they're on their way to deliver it. We then switch back to the planet Ignis, with Gail sitting surrounded by the children of the corn. The Mentalics. And young Sheldon decided to ask Gail out loud, who is the mule person that she keeps thinking about? Because, nobody minds their business here. Gail tells them that she knows about a threat in the far future named the Mule. And Tellum supports her by telling the group that, yeah, Gail can see the future. Gail then tells the group the story of Harry Seldon and how he used math to predict the future. She starts talking about her past, and we're treated to some cool little flashbacks that we saw in Season 1 with Gail meeting Harry and everything that happened after. Gail continues her pep talk to the team and intentionally or unintentionally gives a good speech to lead them in italics in preparation for the upcoming threat of the Mule. We then switch back to Bel Rios' ship where the Spacers are delivering Hober Malo and his ship to the Empire. They also snitch about how he tried to recruit the Spacers to turn against Empire, but, it kind of makes sense. When the Spacer leader shares that her own daughter was tithed to Empire and actually is the Spacer that works for Bel Rios, it makes sense. She's partially doing this in order to have a legitimate opportunity to see her daughter again. Bel begins asking Hober all the necessary questions like who he is, what he's doing, and where did he get that ship from. But Hober instead tries to race out of the room and ends up eating a fish sandwich for his trouble. He's fed a second helping and a third before he surrenders and finally agrees to do what they say. Hober begins by walking them to the ship and introducing them to the security system, which is incredibly fun to watch as we see Becky get a chance to show how dangerous she can really be. Hober is then able to hop back in on his ship and take off like he's Han Solo and Becky is his Chewbacca. He hops on board and he's able to make everyone eat his dust when he's able to jump into warp speed right out of the hangar. We then switch to Bel giving his report of his encounter with Hober to Brother Day. Day is reacting to and analyzing this new information with just Demerzel and himself. Bel tells Day that he believes that Terminus is preparing for war. Brother Day hangs up and he leaves Bel and Glaywin on scene. Bel and Glaywin then have a conversation about what their next move should be. And Glaywin is leaning towards leaving this life behind, and Bel is debating that Brother Day will just imprison them, or worse, kill Glaywin and torture Bel. They even contemplate turning against Empire themselves and talk out loud about whether they have a chance to take out Brother Day. They reconcile with their emotions and settle with the fact that their best choice is to continue to serve Empire for now, whether they like it or not. We then switch to see Brother Day sitting in a garden wearing his samurai suit, alone, but is shortly joined by Queen Sareth. Day begins talking to Sareth, and in his own way, he actually tries to open up to her and show a hint of vulnerability in order to try to form a connection with her. But Queen Sareth is still very much bothered by her earlier conversation with Demerzel and is in no mood for romance. Sareth instead switches the conversation up and uses this as an opportunity to talk to Brother Day about her family. She wants him to know who each of them were, as they will become his family now too, alive or not. Sareth then painfully describes each and every one of her family members that passed away, and Day does his best to act like he cares. Sareth then lets Day know that she knows that he was involved in her family's death in her own way, she says. Day then turns it around and in his own way reminds her that she can F around and find out if she wants to. Sareth decides to leave, and on her way out, she tells her goon handman Han that she wants to see Brother Dawn. She wants to see him someplace where they can have some privacy. We then switch to Sareth and Brother Dawn disguised and walking through a tunnel to talk. Sareth lets Dawn know that Demerzel killed Sareth's family on Day's orders. Now, Dawn is confused on why she's telling him, and she lets Dawn know that she doesn't want to carry the child of the monster who did this to her family. She tells Dawn that she'll marry Day, but she wants Dawn to be the father of her child rather than Day. And then all those little touches and all those looks and all those little flirts that they've been doing all throughout the season, it all makes sense. And the scene ends with them plotting to have a baby together. And they even kiss to seal the deal. We then switch back to Polly and Brother Constant, still in their prison as they're summoned to the throne room to be interrogated by the Cleons. Now, this is the first time in a long time we're seeing all three of these Cleons together, but it's Brother Day's show for sure. Brother Constant and Polly tell Day that Harry Seldon has come back, and that they're here to offer their olive branch of peace with Empire. They also let them know that Terminus is seeking sovereignty from the Empire. Brother Day is not with the shit and lets Polly know that he is aware that Hober Malo met with the Spacers in an attempt to turn them against the Empire. And the look on Polly's face, because remember, he had no idea on what it was that Harry Black set Hober Malo to do when they went their separate ways back on Terminus. Brother Day genuinely believes that Polly had no idea on what was going on, but he calls out Brother Constant for looking sus. We then see Brother Constant step up, give a nod, and then boom, out comes the projection of Harry Seldon when Harry gave Constant a kiss on the top of her head. Demerzel then tells us that when Brother Constant walked through the port, the scanners back at the port, they detected 2 brain scans in Constant's mind. And Harry does it again. My guy is always 3 steps ahead of the Cleons. The irony is not lost on Brother Day that Harry is extending his influence beyond his natural lifespan. And we also touched on this recently when Sauber commented to Harry White about how the genetic dynasty now has competition. Harry tells Brother Day that what Day is looking at is just a thin sliver of himself, and that the real Harry Black is still on Terminus. Day then asks Harry why he is here, and Harry just goes all out and puts his cards on the table. We at Terminus have the means to win this war, so get down or lay down. Surprisingly, Brother Day seems unimpressed. Brother Day then goes on to do his favorite thing ever and listen to the sound of his own voice, and tells Harry Black that he's already made up his mind to end the genetic dynasty and how he's engaged to be married. Brother Day then gives the order for his goons to shoot force lightning at Brother Constant to shock the Harry Seldon out of her. Constant survives and talks about how she could sense Harry in her mind but couldn't speak up. Right at that moment, Brother Day orders them to be taken away. We then switch back to Salvor on Ignis, and she's taking a look at the boats that she was staring at earlier in the episode when she was walking with Lauren. She gets approached by Gail, who begins asking Salvor what it is that she thinks she's doing by snooping around the boats. Salvor lets us know that she feels like her ability to tell when someone is lying is being blocked. She talks about how she tried to use it earlier with Lauren. Gail doesn't like this at all and tells Salvor that she needs to stop effing around with these nice people stuff, and storms off when she sees Lauren approaching. We then switch to see Salvor later that night sitting in her room playing with her coin. Salvor doesn't go to sleep, and instead she gets up and goes back out to the boat in the middle of the night, and she's able to use the equipment on the boat to figure out where it is that it's been. She gets on the boat, and after a few moments, we see Salvor approaching those familiar-looking cliffs with the Australian survivor pool that the Mentalics put Harry in at the end of the last episode. Salvor approaches the area, and we see Harry's body floating in the water, looking kinda unalive. Tellum Bond then reveals herself, gives her a villain speech about how what she's doing is necessary, and then puts Salvor to sleep face down in the same pool that she used on Harry. End episode. And all of that crazy stuff that has happened? Hober Malo tried to recruit the Spacers, and that backfired. Or did it? Queen Sareth is pushing Demerzel's and Day's buttons, and decided to put her ultimate plan into action by driving a wedge between the genetic dynasty by having a baby with Dawn instead of Day. Oh, and Polly and Brother Constant, they're in a very ugly situation now, so how's that supposed to work out? Was this all part of Harry Black's plan? Oh, and Harry Black. So he just sent the clerics into the lion's den knowing that they'd be arrested? Sound like Harry's MO to a T, and it echoes the same underhanded tactics when he first brought Gail into this situation in the first place, way back in season 1. And lastly, am I the only one who realized that we essentially have 3 Harrys now? We have Harry White, who got offed by Tellum Bond on Ignis. We have Harry Black, who's in the vault back on Terminus. And we also have Harry, let's just call him Harry Slim, who's just a slither of Harry Black that seems to be sharing brain space with Brother Constant now on Trantor. This is interesting, as even Brother Day is noticing how Harry's tactics to overthrow the Empire essentially are mimicking Cleon's tactics by multiplying himself. And yo, this episode was amazing, and things pick up even further in the next episode. Trust me, this next episode will have everyone talking, so before I let you go, do me a favor, hit that like button. Please hit that like button and subscribe so you can join us again next week as we deep dive into the next episode and talk about what happens next. Otherwise, I'm gonna have to check you all later. Peace. Yeah.